Okay, so it is 3:44 a.m. East Coast time, and have been having a hard time getting to sleep, as has been the case for a bit of time, and so we're just gonna go ahead and chat. Good old chat. Now, we'll go ahead and see about messing around on Twitch. Okay, be civil, don't be a jerk. According to chat for the stream. So go ahead and see what can I get into on here. I'm using Streamlabs at this time. Howdy, AI viewers from Peak Pie. How goes it? So let's see what sort of application I can pull up. Studio mode. Okay, see about if can. Oh, yeah, there's a lot going on with that for the AI chatbots. That's okay. Refresh chat. Let's see. Now, it's been a while since I've messed with Streamlabs. So let's see if I can go ahead and put up a application. Okay, there it would be a source, new application, media file, game capture, media file, video capture, display capture, window capture. Yes, I'll go ahead and open. I'm gonna try this Logos Bible software because that's always fun to look into. Screen capture, add source, and it would be screen number 1. Be there, and then not in studio mode. Okay, let's see. Video capture. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead and edit that. Yeah, so right now the goal is to, let's see, get something going of I guess a book club study thing. Maybe we'll see. So anyhow, today's topic will be on pride. That's the big thing, right? Before the fall. Now this is saying that pride can have two different meanings, right? There is a reasonable or justifiable self-respect, or improper and excessive self-esteem known as conceit or arrogance. And when I hear conceit, I think of deceit, which of course is similar sounding for sure. I imagine some etymological root similarity. Root terms involved for what goes into those two terms. But yeah, so let's see what's going on with this properties projector performance. So just behind the scenes talk right now about how I'm getting this going. Let's see. Let's see. Transform, group on group, scale filter, blend, deinterlace, all this different sort of interesting stuff. Let's see what would happen if I were to. Okay. I'm gonna have to go this route. So anyhow, back to this. When looking at this, King James version, that's a great one. This is the King James 1900. It says, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." So I'm sure everyone can think of times where someone has done something, and it's like, oh, what do you know? That was really dumb. They were conceited. They had excessive self-esteem. They were arrogant, as the Baker Encyclopedia of the Bible would put it, in a different arrangement of terms, but terms nonetheless. And it would go beyond that reason. So anyhow, here it's saying the Apostle Paul expresses a positive kind of pride when speaking of confidence in Christians. That would be in 2 Corinthians, or of that in strength in the Lord. Also in 2 Corinthians, later on in the book, different chapter. However, it is the latter sinful meaning of pride which frequently appears in the Bible, both in the OT and New Testament. So that's it hits hard for me because I was trying to do this and do that, and yeah, it didn't go the best in some ways. But God was gracious and merciful, and for that I'm grateful. I'm not always the best at honoring God, loving God, following God, trusting God, all the different sort of related stuff. But there is still the sense of desiring to follow Him, to some degree striving to follow Him, even if at times a bit inconsistent. That's part of why I'm doing this, is to be more consistent. Because here's the thing. They say that, faith without works is dead. They also say that, your faith will produce works. Well, there's also the sense of, we say that psychologically you're more likely to be like those you're around. But there's also something to be said about if you don't use it, you lose it in terms of skill and the renewing of the mind that the Bible talks about. So all those sort of concepts involved lead to the sort of idea that's like, even when you don't feel like it, you go to the job. Even when you don't feel like it, if you don't eat, you're going to die eventually. Fasting is good. Sometimes, depending on what you're fasting from, what your medical condition is, this and that. But there are times where it's like, okay, you don't have to eat. You're going to have to eat eventually while you're in this physical earthly form, but you don't have to eat all the time. I say that as a guy who struggled with excessive desire of food, gluttony, the lust of the flesh, as it were. And I say that all to say that there is a sense of right contextual consideration that has to be noted. And that requires a level of discernment and self awareness for anyone involved. Because, what is fasting for one person may seem like starvation for another, but it does not necessarily mean that it is starvation for another. And not only that, but it's the right consideration. So, like, a diabetic fasting is going to look different than an athlete fasting. Is going to look different than an obese person who's not necessarily they might be in between the two because they're holding a lot of weight, so there's a certain degree of strength but not quite athletic per se, but they're not necessarily at diabetes level of insulin resistance. So that all three of those, it's on a spectrum, all three of those are going to look different for fasting. And I say that to say that when one considers how they approach life when dealing with pride and when dealing with pain and backset and works and what not to do, all the different stuff, it's important to realize that, ultimately there's a sense in which you don't know what life is going to hold. The person who goes carnivore, they might do well, they might not, because there's discussion points regarding what to eat, the right diet, whether it should be Mediterranean or vegetarian or vegan or carnivore or whatever. But, for some people it's going to work, for some people it's not. But you don't know. You have a guesstimate, this idea that maybe it could, maybe it wouldn't, I don't know, but I'm just going to take a chance. And what ends up happening is that some people live to a great age and they smoke and they do drugs and all the different stuff. Other people, they are healthy and then they die young, car crash or whatever. Person who's trying to do carnivore or whatever, trying to get healthier, it may or may not work for whatever reason. Call it the other supplements or medications are on their own metabolism. Call it the food in general they have, perhaps. some of the food that they're eating has you know certain like chemicals or ingredients. Even if they're going for something more holistic, perhaps they can't get the ultra like lean or like grass fed kind of meat. And that is to say, when you're dealing with yourself, when you're dealing with others, you have to realize the different components involved that can contribute towards your pride. You have to realize that there is a sense in which those backing you might not really have you in mind. Those who seem distant from you might be giving you space to make mistakes that you can learn and grow, but they do still have your back. You'll find out over time. But as far as the whole pride thing goes, let's continue looking here because I'm rambling a bit, but that's kind of normal for me, so don't worry about it. Okay, so here's a key passage from Proverbs. It says Proverbs 3:3-4. This is the King James Version again. Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. That hits hard. Those of you who don't know, I felt called to ministry. In some ways, I still feel called to ministry. In some ways, I feel disqualified. In some denominational and societal senses, there is a certain degree of discussion point, let's call it, where some people would say, well, it's not ideal. Some of your past situations. That didn't stop a murderer like Paul, but at the same time, he dealt with consequences of his past actions, and the actions going forward from his repentance and from his revelation. The revelation that God gave him. So, try to be careful not to be hyper weird in the whole thing of like God, God, God. But there's also this sense of, if there's that burning passion, that burning desire, and it won't go away, and you've tried everything else, it's like at a certain point, just pick up the chicken, right? Or whatever. It's like at a certain point you go, okay, well, here's my cheat meal. It's like at a certain point, where do you go? It's permissible and it's profitable, but be wise that you don't fall again further from your pride. So, that all being said, there could be a sense of saying, well, circumstances were in the way. There could be this sense of saying, that, people were in the way, or that finances were in the way. The devil, he made me do it, or he put something in the way, or whatever. It's like, all those could even be true simultaneously. But if you have a task, you have a task. Like, I got out of the hospital recently. Mental health stuff. Could call it just psychological, could call it spiritual warfare, probably a bit of both, whatever the case. But, something they said in the hospital, and something I've known from prior hospitalizations, whether you're going for physical health or mental health or whatever, you probably are aware of this, that the bills don't stop. The phone calls don't stop. You just kind of disappear for a bit, and then you come back, and life had continued on without you. That's kind of its own level of distressing. Shouldn't be distressing per se, but stressful for sure. And to get a little nuance about it, like, there's a degree of like, it's annoying and stressful compared to, I'm gonna lose my mind. I would say that, something to remember is that, life goes on, and so in some ways it's good not to get too ahead of yourself, per se, because there is something beautiful in the fragility and inherent humbleness of one's position in life. So, like, at one point I was having this existential crisis after my second marriage failed, lost the ministerial position through church politics that I think was shady. And we had a not great falling out. And I ended up losing custody of my son from concerns about my mental health. He was not in harm's way, but it ended up being this thing where They're like, okay, well, he was hospitalized, and some of his wording and this and that, and like aggression. They're just like, okay, well, his mom stepped up, and it was good that she stepped up, all that. But like, it ended up just being this thing where I'm like, I lost everything. Well, first off, I didn't lose everything. There were still friends who cared. There's still family who cared. I didn't end up homeless, but a lot of the things that really meant something to me, I lost. And so there's a sense of like, what's my point in life? Like this idea of why am I alive? And that's a mild way to put it. Um, and I ended up walking to the park where down the road from my childhood home, and I ended up seeing that it looked different than when I was a child. There was a tree that used to overhang the pond, and that tree was gone. Um, and I thought, no one who just moved here knows about that tree unless someone tells them about it. And they can't really, like, fully visualize. I mean, maybe they have good, like, ability to see things in their mind's eye, but, like, or imagination or something, but, like, they won't really be able to grasp that like us kids used to climb on that tree dangling over the pond. I didn't, but like the other kids did. Like there was this other tree that was put up. There was this uh couple who lived down the road who had a son who passed, and they ended up putting up a tree for him. And the tree got overgrown, and I think I had heard they were gonna like cut it down. And I thought, in 100 years, this place is probably gonna look completely different. First off, I'll probably be dead by then. You never know, but probably. And like, what will be said of like the memory of both those trees? One that just hung over the pond, and the other that represented a lost child who passed at a young age. What's gonna like leave memorial to the fact that like any number of people existed? It's not to get too like depressing or dark. Meant to be freeing in the sense of saying try to be careful not to take life too seriously, because you know pride does come before fall. But again, it's saying like where's the verse? He giveth grace unto the lowly. So like we are an inherently lowly bunch. That's not to give in to hyper um critical condemnation of humanity or human nature that we're just evil scum. Because I don't think that's entirely the case. I think we are capable of great evil, but we're also capable of great good. It's just the unique positioning, circumstance, challenge of humanity, and different folks go by different strokes and have different proclivities of different kinds. That some people seem more evil than others. Some people are more involved in evil than others. Some more good, whatever have you. And there's so many factors involved in that. But when all is said and done, between the righteous and the unrighteous, sun shines and rain falls, and people die, and there's a lot of question about what will happen after death, whether it be hell, Sheol, Gehenna, Hades, whether it be Nirvana, whether it be heaven, whether it be Abraham's bosom, paradise, all these different sort of similar but distinct terms that have their own sort of attached um, ideas behind them. And it's like, who knows? God knows, but like, you can think and maybe to some degree you have maybe some more insight than someone else. But, as part of being a finite human being, even if you're accessing ideas from the Bible or from theological schools of thought or summary or AI or whether you're involved in some sort of communing with existence or talking to spirits or just heavy contemplation, the shower thought or the getting high or any number of things that have you in a position where you feel that you have some sort of greater understanding of what awaits you. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I will say that in being able to be free from the constraints of this is how it is, this is how it has to be, what ends up happening, and it's something I really struggle with in my day to day. So I'm preaching to myself right now, preaching to choir, preaching to everyone, just putting it out into the ether, as it were. Um, there is a sense in which acknowledging how lowly you are is quite freeing, not because you don't deserve love, you need love. And dare I say, in your own unique way, you deserve it, that in a way that is distinctly for you. That being said, there is that fragility. So back to questions on pride. Uh, It says, in a biblical sense, pride is a noun. It is unreasonable in order. Okay, we already read that. Arrogance, mood is a dominant. Oh, those are related topics. Okay. So, that being said, let's see. It is better it is to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. I think that's a good area to end this, to be able to say that, he who trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. Now, you could go ahead and go with different translation where it says, they who trust in the Lord, because, it's not specifically just for man, but like all of humankind. But that's the thing is, if you're only trusting in yourself, you're only going to get so far, and certainly you should have a degree of self confidence and self competence to be able to pull something off. That you're not completely dependent on the whims of anything and everything. But at a certain point, it's important to realize that your health can go away. Your car can break. Your job can go bankrupt. The banks can fail. The governments can be overturned. There's any number of things that can happen that then what you place your security in can end up, not being as secure. Um, but, there was saying, whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. So, yeah, I'm sure that happy is, kind of a, what does it say there? Noun, masculine, plural, construction, Hebrew. It's, yeah. Maybe happy isn't a word we'd use nowadays. Again, this is the King James 1900. But, nonetheless, it's important to realize that there is a certain joy that can be had, or a peace and serenity, from just being able to go, okay, well, God, you've got this. There's only so much I can do. You know, humble me, hallowed be thy name. Let's figure this out together. I want to honor you. So, I hope y'all have a good one, and take care. Bye.